What I want to do now is I want to go and apply our multiliteracies grammar to tactile meanings. So what we might do is we might refer to the world using objects, and it might be a tool, it might be a toy, and these are kind of like a specific tool or a specific toy. These are like common nouns, or a concept, a kind of tool or a kind of toy, and they have characteristics which are sort of like adjectives, shapes and sizes and qualities, and they have relations. You might fit them in relation to each other. You might put the imaginary car on an imaginary road, or the imaginary doll in an imaginary bed, or as we saw in the picture back there, the imaginary dolls in an imaginary car, which is just a couple of boxes. So in other words, what we might do is we might put those things together in relationships like prepositions, and in a way, and they have a whole lot of possessives in them as well, which is, it's my car, that car has certain things which are possessive, it's got a door, the car's door, and so on. So in other words, we build all those relationships in these objects as well. Then to dialogue is that people are positioned in relation to objects, and the objects actually position you. So let's take tools for example. That the way in which you position yourself, your body in relation to the world that you're acting on, is different if it's a hammer compared to a saw, and in a way, it's the hammer compared to the saw that positions you differently. Now, you've learned conventionally this is what you do with a saw and this is what you do with a hammer. You do different things, but you do them in different ways. And in a way, the object positions you in relation to the world. A toy car is different from a doll. You're positioned differently in relation to that object and in relation to the world that that object represents. So, in other words, there are profound interpersonal, interpersonal, dialogical things that are to be found in objects. To use that word dialogue again to describe person to the world relationships, not literally talking. That's what I'm trying to imply by that word. Now, these objects have structures, which is like syntax. Give a kid a Lego kit, and they're operating on the syntax of building something where the components go together to form something. They're learning something about the syntax of objects in the world. And that all objects have materials. They've got a materiality to them, which are like the media we use. So in other words, in written language and spoken language, there are media, right? So the media for written language might be, writing, that's media, or the media for written language might be talking into a video like I am now. Well, materials have media. The media of the tactile world are materials. And the materiality shapes that meaning, right? What it's actually made of is pretty important. So that's the area of structuring meanings. These meanings are also situated. Where is the object? What's around it? That tells you something about what the object is. A hammer sitting on my desk at school would be a rather strange thing, but sitting in a regular desk, but sitting in a technical studies classroom, it means something different. How is it like other objects, and how is it different from other objects? What are the similarities and differences? So in language, we call that genre. A narrative is like other narratives, and a report is like other reports. Well, this tool is like other tools, this toy is like other toys, and the situation in which these things are found, how it's like and unlike other objects, frames its meaning in some very important ways. Finally, purposes are designed into the object. So in other words, the purpose of a saw is designed into a saw, the purpose of a hammer is designed into a hammer, but also I can use that object with different purposes. I don't have a hammer handy, but I've got I've got a little metal car, and I can use that just to push in something that I would otherwise use a hammer for. So things can be used in ways which are different from what's designed into them. Your own purpose as a user change the way in which that particular object is used. So what we have is intention written into and around objects, both in their designs and in their use. I want to come to this synesthesia idea again by talking about metaphor, right? This world which is felt and touched and smelt this tactile world. There's an incredible metaphorical power in this world, and we import the sensations of that world into language. So when we say warm, so down the bottom of the email it says warm regards. What does warm mean? Well, warm literally means temperature, which we can feel with our bodies. It's a tactile kind of thing. And what does cool mean? Cool's a funny word. I can be cool, which is, wow, I'm cool. Or I can be cool in the sense of being indifferent. It's got a whole pile of associations, but they're imported into language out of our very, very visceral experience of the tactile world. Things that are, someone's a rough diamond, someone's a smooth talker, something's happened to me which is really painful, this person is being really sweet. All of these things, that when that word's used, it takes our meaning, it transports us backwards and forwards between the world of deeply felt material, tactile experience and the world of language. It's a nice example of synesthesia. Now, the only interesting thing, of course, with metaphor is if I say somebody's really sweet, I often don't think about what sweet originally means. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But whatever it is, there are degrees of transportation backwards and forwards between these modes of meaning in the use of metaphor. A final point I want to make about tactile, which is a point about all these modes, a little point about the theory of multimodality. What's incredible is that you can do the whole of language in touch, and Braille is a good example. So in other words, that we can actually build complete meaning systems in these other modes. So in other words, if somebody is blind, that they're able to read through the sense of touch.